Hello, and welcome back to another Eduonics tutorial. In this section, we're going over effects and techniques in Photoshop. And in this video, we'll be going over how to whiten the infinity wall. So, what exactly is an infinity wall? An infinity wall is just a white background, really. Sort of like a green screen, only instead of being green, it's white. It's also called a cyclorama, a cyc wall, and an infinity curve. It's usually made and used by photography studios whenever they want to shoot photos on a pure white background. So why are infinity walls not just called white backgrounds? The issue with plain white backgrounds comes to when you have to show anything near the ground, including someone's legs and feet. There's always an awkward shadow where the wall meets the floor, and it can be incredibly distracting. With infinity walls, though, this problem is solved because the bottom corners are usually softened by curves, creating the illusion of an infinite space, hence the name infinity wall. The difference between a white infinity wall and a green screen is that green screens are used as masks for you to insert other backgrounds entirely, whereas white infinity walls are used as is, and they are just there to serve as a pure white background. So, if an infinity wall is already white, why would you need to whiten it? Well, remember that an infinity wall is a physical object that people touch and walk on. So it's subject to dirt, damage, and unwanted shadows. I'm just going to zoom in near this man's feet to show you what I mean. You see all these cracks and debris? Not exactly what we're looking for with an infinity wall. Since this infinity wall is basically just a white background, this tutorial will apply to really any white background that you're trying to clean up. Okay, so I want the white on this image to be completely white. And I don't really need these studio lights on the right and on the left. So I'll go over to my Tools panel and grab my Crop tool. Then I'll press and hold my Alt key and click and drag one of these edges inwards until both studio lights are hidden. Then I'll click the check mark to commit my crop. To increase the whiteness, I'm just going to try bumping up the exposure. To do that, I'm going to go down to the bottom of the Layers panel and click the New Adjustment Layer button. Then I'll select Exposure. Then I'm going to go ahead and go up here and increase the exposure to about +3. Okay, so the background is completely white, but it's also degrading the rest of the image. You can see that the colors on this guy have been overexposed, and as a result, I'm losing some detail and getting unwanted color noise. So in order to get a high quality image, I'm going to have to select this guy and isolate him from the background. I'm going to delete my exposure layer by clicking it and dragging it down to the trash icon. Then, before I try selecting this guy, I'm going to see if I can try making it easier for myself. You see, with this specific image, I have an advantage in that he's kind of in the dark, whereas the background is mostly in the light. So, if I exaggerate both the shadows and the highlights, it should make him stand out more. And in turn, this will make him easier to select. To do that, I'm just going to go down to the bottom of the Layers panel and click the New Adjustment Layer button. Then I'll go up and select Levels. Then I'll go up to Levels in my Properties panel and drag the Shadow slider to the right till I get to about 50. This will darken my shadows, so it will be easier to distinguish the man from the background. Then I'll go over and drag the Highlight slider to the left till I get to about 160. This will brighten up the highlights and make it even easier to distinguish the man from the background. Now I'll go up to the Tools panel and grab my Quick Selection tool, located directly above the Crop tool. Then I'll just start selecting him. I'll make sure that I've got his pants, his torso, his shoes, and his shoes' soles. That looks pretty good. I'll go up in the Tool options to Refine Edge. Now, with the Refine Edge dialog open, I'll go over to Radius and increase it to 5 pixels. This will let a little more detail into my outermost edges. Then I'll go down and increase the smoothness to about 20. This will sort of sand down any rough parts of the selection. I'll go ahead and keep the feather at 0 pixels since I don't want to blur this selection at all. Then I'll go down and increase the contrast to 30. This will really help define the edges and distinguish them from my background. Then I'll go down to Shift Edge and bring it down to around -20. This will clean up any unwanted outlines from my selection. Then finally, under Output 2, I'll keep it as Selection, since I just have my Levels layer selected and I don't intend to use this as a mask for my Levels layer. Remember that the Levels layer is just temporary. I simply use the Levels layer to make it a little easier to make a good selection. Now I'll go ahead and click OK. I'm going to delete my Levels layer by dragging it down to the trash icon at the bottom of the Layers panel. Then I'll click the New Adjustment Layer button and go up and select Exposure again. Now I have a new exposure layer with my refined selection as its layer mask. I'm going to go ahead and increase my exposure again to about +3. Oops! Looks like my mask is making the exposure affect him instead of the background around him. I'll go ahead and invert my layer mask by making sure it's selected. Then I'll hit Ctrl-I on my keyboard to invert the mask colors. There we go. That's better. This looks just about perfect. It just looks like there's a little bit of exposure leaking onto the soles of his boots. No worries. I'm just going to zoom in on them a little closer. Then I'll go over to my Tools panel and get my Brush tool. Then I'll go up in the Tool options and make sure that the hardness is around 80%. I'll make sure that my swatch color is set to black. Then I'll just do some touch-up on the mask. No big deal, it's just that the soles were mostly white to begin with, so they blended in with the background when I used my levels layer to help me make my selection. I'm just brushing in the areas that I don't want to be brightened. And if I need to change the size of my brush, I can just use the bracket keys on my keyboard. Also, if there's any areas I do want to brighten, this is a good opportunity for me to fix those areas as well. All I have to do is switch my brush color back to white, and then brush those areas in. There we go. Perfect. I'll zoom back out to get a better look. Now he's truly on a white background. It even looks like he's staring off into infinity. You know what? Now that I have this pure white background, I can play with it a bit. Having a pure background makes it incredibly easy to add new elements to it. I'm going to go up here in my Documents tabs and select this one to the right of my current document. On this image, I have a bunch of different people, and they're already on a pure white background. I think I want to add this guy to my other document, the guy in the far right in the second row. I'm going to select him. I'll go over to the Tools panel and get my Zoom tool. Then I'll click on him a few times to magnify in his direction. Now, since he's already on a white background, I don't need to get all fancy with my selections. I can just go over to the Tools panel, grab my lasso tool, and make a very rough selection around him. Again, no need to make this perfect. As long as my selection doesn't include any other parts of other people, I should be fine. Okay, that's all I need. To copy him, I'll just hit Ctrl-C on my keyboard. Then I'll go up and switch back to my original document tab. Now to paste him onto this document, I'll hit Ctrl-V on my keyboard. There he is. Oops, there's a lot of white overlapping in the selection. No worries, I'll just go over and get my Move tool, and I'll move him over to the right a bit. That's perfectly fine. You see, with a white background, it's insanely easy to add or remove elements from any image. Whitening the infinity wall, or really any off-white background, is very easy. If you need to isolate your subjects from the background, you can use levels to make them stand out a little more before you select them. Then, after you've made a rough selection, you can use Refine Edge to improve the quality of the selection's edges. Once your subject is isolated, you can use an exposure layer to brighten the background as much as you like. And finally, once you've got a pure background, there's no limit to the things that you can add to your document. That will do it for whitening the infinity wall. I'll go over another effect and technique in the next video.